Thank you for tuning into the JMKing podcast with Jonathan M. King. That's me. You can listen on all major podcast platforms, including but not limited to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Podbean app, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and Amazon Echo. Visit my website, jmkingpodcast.podbean.com. The link to my RSS feed is there as well. Last but not least, subscribe to the YouTube channel, JMKing Vids Pods, and follow me on Twitter at JMKing Vids Pods. All links can be found in the description. And now, on with the episode. Welcome back to the JMKing podcast. I'm joined by my friend Matthew Francisco, aka Movie Matt.
Hey.
We're talking top 5 favorite movies of all time. 5 for me was District 9. 5 for Matt was The Lion King. Let's look at my number 4. I'm in high school, and one of my friends is constantly trying to get me to watch this film. It's the 10th anniversary of the film, 2004, DVD collection or DVD pack, multiple discs in it. He lets me borrow it. We're in class. He's constantly roasting our classmates who deserved it at the time with lines from this movie saying that they had IQs less than their shoe size, etc. And we have it finally. I had this movie for months, just like sitting there. And one day, I'm thinking of all these excuses as to why I haven't watched it yet. He comes over. We have a half day. We took some kind of practice test in the morning. We have the afternoon to ourselves. We're walking home, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, we can watch this movie today." Because you don't have anything to do, and school year is almost over. We don't have work. We don't have any projects or homework to work on. Let's watch it. Couldn't think of an excuse. Had to sit and watch it. And I've as the villain, playing the villain, you always have some kind of comeuppance. And this was my villain's comeuppance because I went from having no interest into this film for it becoming my top 4 favorite of all time. And that movie is 1994's black and white Kevin Smith production Clerks. What? How do you go from District 9 to Clerks? Well, Clerks is besides that story, Clerks is a very personal film for me because it's about 2 guys doing one of my favorite things to do. Not work in a convenience store. I never worked in a convenience store. I never worked in a movie. Those don't exist anymore. A movie rental place. It's all online now. But all of these guys do throughout the day is just talk about things that are interesting, that matter to them, that seem mundane to most people, or dare I say unimportant or unintelligible. And they have all of these passionate arguments going back and forth about these movies and these topics that really, really matter to them. Then anybody else listening in would just be like, you are both really talking about this right now. Minus the obscene language that these gentlemen use. It also takes place in New Jersey. And I believe in Matthew, you're the master of movie trivia and fun facts and production background information.
Anecdotes, yeah.
Anecdotes. Didn't Kevin Smith have to ask? Didn't Kevin Smith actually work at the quickie shop, or what is it called?
He did. The name escapes my name, but what was actually going on was he was working at the shop at the store at the time. And again, one of the reasons why it was shot in black and white is because he had to shoot it during the night shift, right?
That's why.
That's why. Yeah,
I thought he didn't have enough money to film in color. I heard that.
Well, that too, but it was also to hide the facade that it was actually taking place at night. Because when you shoot in black and white, you can create the illusion of day better because obviously through the windows you just add extra like those white paper strips through the window.
Yeah.
Get some light on. Boom. Daytime.
That, I mean, the more I learn about this movie, the more I love it because it's one of those. Think about it like this: I just recently saw Friday with my wife, and Friday is one of those like slice of life movies. There's not much of a plot. It's just kind of these two dudes, and they just have a day. Just that's the movie. It's just a day in the life of what these guys do. Clerks is kind of like that. I like how mundane it is, but the conversations make their day so exciting. You do have a character arc. We do have our protagonist Dante, and Dante is a guy who is highly intelligent, but just doesn't have a lot of ambition and go-getterness. He always complains about how much he hates his job, but he never does anything about it. He just kind of complains about how much he's the movie takes place in a day when it's actually his day off.
I'm not supposed to be here today.
I'm not even supposed to be here today, which he constantly says every time something happens during the day that sucks during the film. And he's got a girlfriend who's kind of pushing him, and she's like, you have so much potential. You can go back to school. You can be somebody. You can and no, and we're not trying to say that working in a convenience store, working in a video store, we're not saying that these jobs aren't important. We're not saying that people who have these jobs are like, we're not talking down to them, but we're talking about Dante who is not satisfied with that job, but doesn't do anything to change his situation. And over the course of the film, he's got a friend named Randall, who is a polar opposite of Dante, who's completely satisfied with his current position at his job and life. He complains about the job all the time, but he's perfectly fine working there.
So like ignorant bliss in some way.
Ignorance is bliss. He's like, I don't really know. I'm good. I'm good. But Dante isn't, and everybody in Dante's life just pushes him to like be better. And eventually Dante just kind of realizes that about himself. He's like, I realize that I'm not the kind of person to make waves and challenge the status quo, rattle the cages, if you will, just so that I can have what I want. And of course, the movie taking place in New Jersey, just kind of like, I'm from Jersey.
Just a bonus.
It's just a bonus, you know? What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah. Well, I've often said to Jonathan, like, we've been friends over years, I think he and I, we're kind of like the PG Dante and Reynolds.
We are. You're definitely you're the respectful one, remember?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that's coming. Yeah, that's coming.
It's coming later in the podcast.
No, we're essentially Dante and Randall minus the sexual innuendo and the profanity.
There's a lot of profanity in this movie.
There's a lot. Yeah, lot. Get your grandma out of the room, kids.
Yeah. This one. And this podcast is PG though. We don't.
Yeah, exactly. You know, hopefully Disney Plus plug. No. Anyway, but also when you kind of think about the way Dante and Randall talk, right? They're almost like they were almost podcasting before podcasting was a thing. I mean, you have this like 5-minute scene when they're talking about the contractors from the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi. I mean, who actually can talk about such a minute detail in 5 minutes though? Like all these intricate issues, like okay, like the contracts and what your political affiliation is, you know, like who was doing that in 1994? By the way, I just want to know that what a year 1994 was. You know, we got Clerks, Lion King, but anyway, see.
Oh wow! It's linked. 1994 is Lion King. 1994 is Clerks. Clerks is also in black and white. That's our next.
And we're in number 4.
And we're at 4. And Clerks is also 4. In black and white. And that's that's kind of a teaser for the next thing on the list. But continue. But
yes, no, it's just like, and I remember you said something to me very profoundly, Jonathan. It's like if you had that job, that's probably what you would be doing. Like if you were working, you'd be like, yo, Matt, hey, I have this like overnight shift at like the Quickie Mart or something. You know, come in. We probably, I just imagine us like kind of like eating a bag of potato chips that we're probably not even paying for, and you know, like we're talking about like, oh yeah, if Tony Stark, you know, was like, who was the better one, Tony or Cap or you know whatever. It like just
right conversations that we have anyway.
Exactly.
Without the microphone on.
Imagine if Dante and Randall actually had a podcast. That would be something.
I'd listen to it.
Yeah, and I think I am definitely. I think I'm more of the Don. I'm definitely more the Dante because I'm the one that it's kind of like when he's in a situation where like he doesn't like, but he just kind of just rolls with the punches, but internally he's going, "Oh Jesus, I hate this thing." But so yeah, I'm definitely more of a Dante. So
But I think the thing about it, you're Dante in the sense that you're definitely the more respectful one of
yeah.
the two of us. I think my humor can tend to be a little bit more irreverent.
Right.
But what I like about this movie is there's like I have a balance of both of them
Mm,
as Dante and Randall.
mhm,
There are times when I get annoyed or frustrated with a situation and I know how to fix it, but I know what kind of waves it's gonna make if I
mhm.
employ a strategy to fix it. But I also am like the Randall because sometimes I can kind of just be sensible and make sense of the situation. Randall has this way of just holding Dante accountable and just explaining something to him while Dante is like in a panicky mode. Randall could just like make it sensible. The way he
Right.
just simplifies the issues and just explains it to Dante is like, this is what you buckled. This is entirely on you.
Yeah. You're definitely more easier to talk to than Randall, I will say. Randall can be a bit of a douche.
Randall. I mean,
Randall can be a bit of a
like the
douche.
word is irreverent. Dan Randall and
Yeah,
there's other characters in the film. I mean, the
Jay and
film, of
Silent
course,
Bob,
Jay
which
and Silent Bob. I think this was the
franchise into its own.
first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
the
is
first
the
when they
first
were.
installment of it's called the Jerseyverse. You've got let me see, you've got Clerks, you've got Chasing Amy, you've got Dogma, you've got
Oh,
Jay and Silent Bob Strike.
right.
Oh, you know what? It's kind of
Mall rats too, right?
Mallrats. How could I forget about Mallrats? Stanley cameo.
Yes,
In
there
a
you go,
way,
Captain Marvel. Yeah,
in a way. Oh, speaking of Stanley, it's almost like a kind of precursor to the MCU, isn't it? Like this
a cinematic
interconnect,
universe
the
of
sort of cinematic universe,
characters
right?
that kind of appear in other movies as that
Exactly.
character,
As that character, and yeah,
legit canonized too.
in fact, we're going off to a tangent, but I'll tie it back in, folks. It's kind of like if you remember Captain Marvel, there is this great Stanley. I think one of his last cameos where like it's actually Stanley in Captain Marvel. Like he's auditioning. Like Veers is in the bus and he sees She sees Stanley, and then he's actually reading a script from Mallrats.
So the
He's obviously
MCU is connected to
to the Jerseyverse.
the
To the Jersey.
Jersey verse. But
Yeah.
yeah, ironically, I actually don't care for anything else other than Clerks in that whole universe.
Right.
I never thought Jay and Silent Bob were that funny. They make jokes about weed, and that's
Mhm.
basically the whole thing.
It's kind of like.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
but they just make jokes about weed and stuff, and I
Yeah.
never really cared for the. I mean, it's funny. It's funny when Jay like, who is it? Either Randall's at the door or Dante's at the door, and he like knocks and does something to antagonize him, and he like no, that's not it. The scene where he just runs up and like farts on one of them. Like that was kind of like okay.
I think that might have
Like,
been Jay because Jay's the more active one. Silent Bobby.
and of course, Silent Bob has like the one line in the movie
Yeah.
that snaps Dante out of his
Yeah.
I'm dissatisfied with a certain aspect of my life that's actually great for me. And he kind of just says something to the effect of because Dante has a girlfriend,
Yeah.
Veronica, who's like loves him and just really wants the best for him, constantly pushes him. And she brings him lasagna at work midday. They have like an argument, kind of argument in the beginning of the day. She comes back on her like break between her classes. She's in the university. And she brings him a whole plate of lasagna and
Mhm.
says, you know what, like whatever happened between us, this is the way that I look at it. And then Dante, of
This is the
course, had
way.
a conversation with Randall, and Randall talks some sense into it. She brings him lasagna, but then Dante has this thing where he's kind of like dissatisfied with Veronica for some reason, but and then his ex girlfriend who did nothing but cheat on him all through high school and make him miserable. He's kind of like holding a torch for her,
Mm-mm.
and then Kevin Smith playing Silent Bob shows up at the end of the movie and says, "Listen, man, there's a lot of women in this world, but not a lot of them bring you lasagna at work. Most of them just cheat on you and make you miserable." And it's like leaves. And it's like Dante's like, duh, right? And it's just the thing about this movie, how and I think this is like kind of like one of my final thoughts, Matt, before you can like jump in if you want with
Sure.
yours about the clerks. But I could talk about this movie for hours, but I think for me, what stamps it at number 4, besides that slice of life aspect of like, this is what me and Matthew do all the time. This is what a lot of my friends do. We just sit around and just talk about stuff that we like. And but the idea that it doesn't always take some extravagant, life altering event for you to come to your senses about a certain topic. Sometimes, sometimes it could just be a random conversation you hear on the train, or a dialogue you have with your friends. Some like random, mundane, everyday thing you can overhear, and it just snaps you out of it. And I think Dante, what kind of woke him up wasn't it, again, like an extravagant, life-changing event. He didn't have a heart attack and almost die. Well, the alternate ending, of course, is pretty morbid, but
Very morbid.
he doesn't have a grand epiphany that comes from the clouds parting or somebody dying or getting like deathly ill or almost dying or something. No, that doesn't happen. He just a random bum on a random bum who like who sells weed in front of his convenience store, walks in and just like says something that like changes it, or like his friend just kind of makes sense of something that, I just love the idea of just like everyday things can kind of speak to you and wake you up and inspire you. You know, that's all I got for Clerks. It's not all I got, but for now, it's all I got.
I do. I think one thing I completely agree with anything John said, but to add that kind of Jersey plug, it's like, so New Jersey, we got Bruce Springsteen, Tony Soprano, and Kevin Smith movies. So there you go.
There we go.
Jersey represent.
Jersey represent. All right, and of course, the segue here. Clerks is a film that's completely in black and white.
Yeah.
And okay. Matthew, you're number 4.
All right, my number 4. So we're actually going to change the shift a bit because I might take it to a really serious beat right now. Because my number 4, while not being the top movie on this list, I actually say it's actually the best movie on this list. Because I say the best, when I say best, I mean just really great pathos, well done, great gravitas, and I dare say is actually a movie that can make the world a better place. No, and I think the world is a better place because of this movie.
Okay.
And that's the 1993 Steven Spielberg classic, Schindler's List. So, to give you some backstory on this, I was already a huge Spielberg fan as a kid. Grew up on Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Jurassic Park, Hook. You know, just love Spielberg. He was almost like a father figure in some ways. And then I knew that he had done this quote unquote like Holocaust movie, and I think I kind of stayed away from it for a while because I go like, well, like what is the guy who did a movie about a kid on a flying bike for the alien know about the Holocaust? And like what? And I was, how old was I? I must have been, gosh, like 13 at the time. So I wasn't really.
Wow.
I wasn't really into like deep stuff when I was a 13-year-old. I was probably still duking out with my PlayStation 2, not really thinking about like how bad the world can be. But like I decided, like I was in my video store, and yes, video stores were still in back then. I saw Schindler's List was actually on the shelf, so I decided to pop it in, and I don't know, I was just so enthralled by it.
Good word.
It's like first, you kind of think like, oh, it's like a black and white movie. It's gonna look like something from like the 1940s or something. But no, like I read an interview with Spielberg saying like, why did you shoot the film in black and white? It's because if you think about it, like most of us growing up in like the 80s and 90s and whatnot, we learned the Holocaust through black and white images. And what better way to kind of make it more digestible by presenting it in a way that we already know, through black and white. And it's just visually stunning. Like that opening sequence when Schindler is introduced, like he's putting on his like morning cuffs and his tie and the suit, and he goes into the club, and he almost almost looks like an old-fashioned movie star. The mystique of Schindler and the kind of black and white kind of adds to that like old Hollywood, like he's almost like Humphrey Bogart, like walking in the room and stuff. And this is the part where I almost feel slightly guilty talking about this. It's like, you know, when you do a movie about the Holocaust, right? Like, which is without a doubt one of the darkest chapters of human history. You know, of course you're going to get that emotion from audiences because it was this terrible thing that happened. But to actually like craft like an actual story out of it, like a movie out of that tragedy, you know, it's essentially the heart of the story is about a man, Schindler, who, mind you, he was part of the Nazi party, war criminal, womanizer, you know, was almost, you can almost argue he was active in, you know, human slavery and such. It was almost like, you know, these factory workers, they were kind of like working for nothing. But yet it's through the horrors of the Holocaust, you see this transformation in Schindler saying like, hey, you know, I am in a position of influence and power of some sort. So why not use it to kind of stop this? And but what I really like about the Schindler character is, you know, especially in a film, you can easily kind of make him into like some sort of messianic figure, messiah. You know, he's the one like saving the day. But the film really does not shy away from this man's flaws. He is an extremely flawed guy, and the film constantly reminds us that he is not a saint. Like, this is a man. And anyway, I find that very moving in some ways, that, you know, we don't have to be these, you know, extremely pious, noble people. Like, even good can come out of something that is extremely flawed. And of course, you know, I have to bring in the Spielberg element. Like, I'm going to paraphrase this review from Roger Ebert. It's like, you don't see Steven Spielberg as we know him in this film, but you feel his presence as a storyteller, as a director. Like, you see his emotions like on film, like his blood and guts right then and there, so vulnerable, but, you know, so grown up. And of course it was, you know, rightfully so, it won Best Picture, and it was Spielberg's first Oscar as Best Director. And again, you know, of course, how relevant is the film to talk about racism and intolerance? You know, a film that is certainly relevant today. And for all those reasons, it is my number 4 pick.
Well, Matthew, I appreciate the dissertation, because I've actually never seen Schindler's List.
Right. It's not something you watch for fun, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely something you have to kind of get ready for. Anytime there's the Holocaust, with the exception of probably Django Unchained.
Right, which is, you know,
with the exception of Django Unchained, I mean, when I think about slavery and dark history and film, I have to get emotionally ready. Django Unchained is probably the only one that kind of, I don't want to say makes light or makes fun, but it's more of a romanticized action, kind of comedic in a sense. It does have its moments, but that's one of the things with Schindler's List for me, that the heaviness of it. And of course, my 5, District 9, I've only seen it like less than 5 times because it's so heavy.
It's kind of your not to use hyperbole, but it's kind of your Schindler's List in some ways.
It kind of is my Schindler's List. I guess it just kind of speaks to everything I like in movies in terms of the visual spectacle, but also the mental challenge that it constantly gives me about reflecting against yourself. And so let me ask you this, Matthew. I mean,
sure,
you've seen Schindler's List, and I would argue that Liam Neeson kind of had this Liam Neeson sauce recently,
right?
Since Taken. So, yeah. How do you, when you see Liam Neeson, who is the who plays the protagonist, Oscar Schindler, how do you, when you watch when you watch something like Taken or The Commuter, and then you watch like episode 1, and then you watch, how do you see it as an actor? Like, how does that work for you? Seeing him go from like action to really heavy dramatic pieces like Schindler's List.
I'm just saying it's such a testament to who Liam Neeson is as an actor. As I've often said, off camera, isn't it amazing that Liam is in a position that he actually reinvented his career? Like, I don't want to say towards the twilight of his career, but towards the latter part of his career, because I just thought like Liam Neeson was just one of these thespian actors, like sure he was in Star Wars, but he's also in a bunch of films like Rob Roy and a whole bunch of other dramas. So I never thought of Liam Neeson as a type actor, but it's interesting how he kind of became this like action star like towards his 60s though. So it kind of shows he's certainly a chameleon for sure though.
And I think like when I think of Liam Neeson, I also think of other actors. So like what are the other nominees for movies for actors that kind of had like their own renaissance or a second life? Because Liam Neeson goes from this dramatic thespian or even a boxer from for his acting days. You have Liam Neeson, who's now like an action star from being a dramatic thespian. You have Alan Rickman, who
rest in peace,
but like he was
Hans Gruber. He was Hans Gruber in Die Hard.
He was Hans Gruber. How old was he? He was like 50 or 60 already. And then from there, he kind of had a second life as an actor. Harry Potter, Severus Snape, GOAT, favorite character. Well, second behind Hermione. Like,
that's another episode, by the way.
who are the other nominees for actors that have a second life?
Well, second life in terms of, I don't want to say in terms of like public image changing, but we had like the McConaissance for a while, like Matthew McConaughey hot off of Dallas Players Club, and then of course he gets cast as the protagonist in the Christopher Nolan film Interstellar, and now we are there's a sort of Keanu-sance going on, isn't it? The Keanu-sance.
There's the Keanu-sance, but you did kind of forget one guy. I mean the how would I say the protagonist? I don't know. Robert Downey Jr.
Oh yeah,
as Tony Stark. He just kind of became. And
right.
I think
thanks.
And I think like I don't have much to say about Schindler's List as I haven't seen it. So all I can do is think about how Liam Neeson goes from Oscar Schindler to Qui-Gon Jinn, who's kind of a similar, more of a dramatic kind of character. But in terms of action, when I think Liam Neeson, now I'm thinking Taken. I'm thinking Commuter. I'm thinking Nonstop. So that's the only, I can only really talk about him as an actor, but I can't really say too many details about the film. So I'll let you wrap up this one, Matthew.
I mean, to wrap up my thoughts of Schindler's, again, I just want to, I'll quote Gene Siskel. I'll talk a lot about Siskel and Urell because I love those guys. But I remember this quote that Gene Siskel said during his review of Schindler's List. He said, the first thing when I walked out of that film was as a fellow Jew to Spielberg. If I saw Spielberg down the street, the first thing I want to say is, bless you, sir. Bless you, bless you, bless you for making this movie, because again, I think it is so important that we study history, we teach history in order so that these things never happen again, and that the dooms of or the mistakes of history do not happen in the past though. So I really, other than being a tremendous, highly successful commercial filmmaker, I think that Spielberg as a man did such a great service to society. So I tip my hat off to you, Mr. Spielberg.
All right, I think that's a perfect way to end this before we take our break. I want to say, Matthew, like that film, I think that what Spielberg tends to do, and I know I said you'd have the last word because it's your film, but I do want to make this point that Spielberg, a lot of his work are cultural touchstones. And we have Jurassic Park, which is like a cultural touchstone in adapting books and computer generated animation and computer generated imagery, like the T-Rex and things like that. How the way that Spielberg can blend horror and action and spectacle. Jurassic Park, Raiders of the Lost Ark, classic action film, and E.T. Just his movies just tend to be touchstones for film technological reasons. It's a touchstone to talk about how lucrative films can be, from Jaws in '75, with the one of the first modern blockbusters.
The birth of the American blockbuster.
The birth of the American blockbuster. And I think that Spielberg's legacy with this film is that it is a touchstone, but it's not a touchstone in computer generated imagery. It's not a touchstone in box office bank. It's a touchstone in humanity and movies speak to our condition, and art reflects our experiences. And those who don't acknowledge history are doomed to repeat it.
Well said.
So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on the JMKing podcast. Don't go anywhere.
See ya.
Hey listeners, this is Jonathan M. King here. Now I know we said we'll be right back after this break, and that's because Matthew and I originally conceived these 5 episodes as one giant inaugural episode, but we'd rather not overwhelm you, so we decided to split this up into 5 different pods. That being said, thanks again for spending your time here at the JMKing podcast. Stay tuned and keep listening on your podcast platform of choice. I'm on nearly all of them. Don't forget to visit my website, jmkingpodcast.podbean.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, JMKing Vids Pods, and follow me on Twitter at JMKing Vids Pods. With that, this is Jonathan M. King, signing off.